Well, hello there. It's coming up to 1 o'clock on a Monday, but I'm going to do an old man of the sea story. Now, when I was a lowly cadet, one of my first trips to sea was on what I thought was a very large container ship, but it only held about 3,000 TEUs, which is what they call 20-foot equivalent units, which is it can carry 3,000 20-foot containers basically. And my first trip to sea was to Canada, and we left Felixstowe and we went all the way down over to Le Havre, and from Le Havre we went over to Montreal in the dead of winter. And the weather was absolutely atrocious. We had heavy swells of a good few meters. Anyway, this large container ship would roll from side to side. It would do, I would say it was, well, no, it was 36 degrees. It rolled one way and then it would roll back 36 degrees the other way. So as you can imagine, life on that was pretty rough, and I was sick as a dog. Yeah, absolutely spewing up everywhere. Yeah, but that was the when we got into Montreal. As soon as we hit the St. Lawrence Seaway, we hit the ice, and having a layer of ice over the sea meant that it was all calm. There was no more of this rolling about. Yeah, so it would mostly it was 32 degrees, but it would often go over to 36 degrees as we were going across. But then as soon as we hit the ice, it was bliss. But you could hear the ice scraping down the side of the ship as you were walking around. And by the time we got into Montreal itself, we had over 1,115 tons of ice on board the ship. Obviously, we know what the draft marks were, or what they should have been, using the calculations, knowing how much water we had left, how much fuel we'd burnt, how much ballast we had. We should have had so many draft marks, but we were that much deeper in the water that we calculated that we had all those tons of ice on the ship. And of course, getting into port was quite a workup for the crew, because all the winches were covered in sheets of ice. You're talking that much ice just from the waves as they crashed over on our way across. But that was just one trip where we had extremely bad weather. A second trip was going, I don't know if any of you guys have ever watched a film called The Perfect Storm with George Clooney. Yeah, my wife fancies him. So I've got to compete with George Clooney. Maybe it's my chiseled good looks that attracts her. Anyway, yeah, we were on the same place. We went to the Grand Banks, and we also hit a storm, a cyclonic storm, 120 to 180 knot winds we went through. And as the ship was lurching over one way because of the weather was blowing on the side of the ship, forcing it over, and of course we were up and down through the swell as well. And I remember coming up out of the engine room after doing my evening rounds, and this is about 10 o'clock at night. I went through the galley to see if there was left. They normally leave out some stuff in the fridge, but anyway, as I got to the galley, so we went through the eye of this cyclonic storm, and for about 20 minutes it was just deadly quiet. There was no movement. We were just steaming through, and then all of a sudden we hit the opposite wall of this cyclone, and the ship lurched the other way, and all the plates and all the tin pots and pans in the galley, they went crashing to the floor. So I left it. I wasn't gonna be around any more falling pots and pans. I just legged it, and all the plates that had been wedged up perfectly for the ship being listing over this way, when it suddenly went the other way, they all broke free and smashed to the floor. What a trip that was. And I do remember another occasion. This will be bad weather number 3. We were I think out in the Far East somewhere across the Indian Ocean or around that way, and we'd hit another bad swell. It wasn't so much high winds, but the swell was quite phenomenal. You're talking a 40 meter swell, and it's 120 feet height are these waves. Anyway, this container ship was somewhere in the region of about 4,000 TEUs, so it was much bigger than the first one I was on. Anyway, we went through this weather, and we got into port, and the ship's agent who met us in port came up the gangway and said to us, they said, "Oh, did you know you've got some containers damaged?" No, we didn't know. Anyway, we went out and had a look, and about 15 containers had been split open. This wave must have just crashed along, and it did some damage to the lifeboat as well on the outboard side. It cracked some of the gel coat and stuff, so that wasn't so good. But the last really big storm that I was on a really large container ship. This thing was 6,500 TEUs, so it's double the size of my first ship that I was on, and of course the engine was that much bigger. But anyway, we'd finished discharging our cargo in Taiwan, and we were leaving. Not quite sure where we were going, maybe Korea or something like that. Anyway, we left port into this storm. Obviously, we had to go through the storm to get out. And anyway, the waves were smashing onto the rudder, and the captain, in his wisdom, decided he was going to put 2 steering gear motors on, because he was frightened that the ship might not be able to maintain a course with heavy weather. But the waves pounded against the rudder with the increased pressure in the hydraulic system. One of the pipes burst, and we hoved into that weather. And as we did so, a spare cylinder head. This is a large unit that weighs about 15 tons, metric tons. 15 tons, and this thing broke loose and was sliding backwards and forwards, up and down. We had no steering, and it was a bit of a panic on. So anyway, 2 guys went down the steering to try and fix that. What they actually did was they managed to pull the pipe and shove it back in the hole that it came out of, and get things tightened up and secured with rope and Spanish windlasses. Anyway, they got that secured. Me and the rest of the entire deck crew were down the engine room trying to stop this cylinder head from sliding about. Now, it crashed into the spare piston crown. That only weighed 1.5 tons, and that wedged it into the toilet. Of all places, it wedged it into that toilet, and it stayed there, luckily. But this cylinder head kept sliding backwards and forwards. It put dents in 2 CO2 cylinders. These are the really big CO2 cylinders used for firefighting in the purifier room on the next deck down. Anyway, this cylinder head went crashing into the pony motor, which is part of the generating system. It smooths out the square wave AC into sinusoidal wave AC. Anyway, it smashed those cooling pipes off, and as you can imagine, on a brand new ship, none of us really knew much about the cooling system on that ship, but we did know that there were no valves in the system. It was a valveless set of pipeworks. All the pipes were one piece. There was only like way down was a flange, so that we could get a blank into the flange. And this is a thin piece of tin plate that we slid into the hole. When we prized it apart, you get it. Anyway, you slid. But anyway, I'm getting beyond myself. Anyway, we managed to tie down this spare cylinder head. We got it, once it got itself into a corner, we wedged it down and tied it up as best we could, and continued on our way. But we still had this leaking pipes to fix, and of course the entire cooling system. In the old days, you had separate cooling systems for the generators for the main engines, but no, not on these modern ships. It's all central cooling. It's all connected, and there's no valves. There was no way to shut the water flow off. We had to keep the engine going to keep us pointing into the weather, or else we would have hove to again. And that was one hell of a job, because we were just literally a couple of weeks out of the yard. The chemicals in the cooling system were such a high level that it was almost impossible to work with the water that was spraying in our faces. It was stinging our eyes, and it was hot as well. It was hot water that was spraying out. Now, myself and another colleague, we donned a face shield, and still the water was hitting my chest and bouncing up into my face. But we managed to loosen the flange and stick a blank into each pipe. There's two pipes together. We put 2 blanks in and closed it off, and that stopped the water leak. And we then continued our journey on, and it stayed like that for the next couple of weeks until I went home. When we got back to Southampton, I went home then, and obviously there must have been a team coming to replace those pipes that were damaged, which would have meant having to shut down the entire cooling system. Yeah, we were lucky. We didn't lose the generators. The generators were overheating, and what the first engineer was stood by the generators. As soon as one generator started to come into high temperature, he would then get the next generator online, taking the power. That generator would come off, and he kept that one going. Luckily, we had 6 generators. We needed 2 when we were deep sea. So, as you can imagine, it was touch and go whether we lost all power. But anyway, luckily we got these pipes blanked off, and saved the day. We managed to refill the cooling water system back up and carry on. But yeah, that was 4 storms that stick in my mind. Anyway, well, that's enough for today, and I'll catch you all on the next one, and there will be a next one. Okay, bye then.